Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Depending on where you are, here it's the afternoon. So I just want to introduce Daniel. It's really a pleasure to introduce him to the North House crew here. He's a fantastic woodworker. Joining us from his classically Swedish living room there with the fireside chat. Anyway, I'm just going to turn it over to him. Keep in mind, as Jessa said, the Q&A, I'll be moderating that. So just type the stuff in, and I'll try to get through it as best I can. And also just want to kind of mention the silver lining of this whole COVID year is that these Zoom things are becoming more and more common for us to participate in it. So it's really fantastic that we're able to get people from all over the world to join us. So it's trying to keep the glass half full. All right, Daniel, it's all yours.
Thanks. Wasn't that a nice little intro? I would like to just be able to sit back and listen to Jarrod talk to me instead for half an hour. But alas, so I am in fact named Daniel, but most people probably know me by my Instagram moniker of Storslöjd, or as translated, that means just big slöjd, which started out as a joke. And at this point, the poison is just too deep. But I've grown into it. And let's just get it out of the way. What is slöjd? I basically just use that interchangeably with craft. But whether I want to or not, in Sweden, I work in a ongoing tradition of craftspeople. So here there's as Jesse said, a lot of cultural history attached to it. And we have, in fact, a whole state-funded system built around promoting and facilitating slöjd for people. So we have what's called, I don't know what you would translate it to really, but it's gone so far as we have what's called county slöjd consulants, state-funded employees, at least 2 in every counties, that work with slöjd and just make it possible for people to slöjd, as if there's an evil cabal somewhere hindering people to do that, but there's not. And they're also, part of the mission is also to help me, not me personally, but professional craftspeople to be able to make a living, somewhat of a living from doing this. But that's where it gets a bit murky. It's all divided up by county, and they sort of don't always talk with each other, but it's a nice thing to have around. And I'm not really the right person to talk about that bit really, because, well, let's just say, well, slöjd in Sweden is, craft in Sweden is like doing craft or arts anywhere. It's tough making a living from it. And there's not a lot of money around. And you're expected to do a lot of things just for your love of the game, I guess. And I do love the game, but I also like for it to love me back every now and then. And I promised myself not to go on a tangent about this, because I can, and I have, and I've come to realize that it's just, let's just say, I'll leave it at this. Let's just say that I'd rather starve than be thankful for crumbs, if only to preserve what I feel is my slöjd, my craft, and the integrity of it. I feel that slöjd, it doesn't owe me anything, but I owe craft a whole lot. So I need to respect it. So I don't want to just do things for free, which might sound odd to people, because to respect it would be to pass it on. But that's not my slöjd. That's not what floats my boat. So let's just leave it at that. That's slöjd. We have a whole system built around it in Sweden. We have a lot of history, cultural history attached to it. A lot of people have at least a cursory knowledge of what slöjd is. We have different sorts of slöjd. When you say slöjd to a Swede, the first association might be, for us, shop class. Because when I went to school, I didn't take shop class, I took slöjd. But we weren't sat around carving spoons. It was very much a bandsaw, dry wood, sandpaper sort of deal over here as well. So a lot of people, they know about slöjd, which can be a good thing, but also it's just slöjd. Just slöjd to people. So I wasn't supposed to go on a tangent, so let's just stop it there. Now, I would just like to jump straight into what I'm doing now and just gloss over my sort of, I don't know, craft origin story, which is what I usually do, because I just feel that, well, let's just say my, it's not sad enough or romantic enough to be that good. I just started crafting, really. But I'll humor you just a bit, give you the highlights. So let's turn back the clock. Me, 20-something-year-old Daniel. I was living in Stockholm back then. I was sat behind a computer, writing my own pieces and ghostwriting. And I was doing a lot of painting at the time as well. I held on to my watercolors for dear life. But when I started sort of leaning more and more into doing everything digitally, it went off the rails. And I was just doing everything in front of a computer, and I had this sort of mid-20s something crisis that's still ongoing, I guess. I just had this realization that, and I asked myself, when was the last time you made anything for real? Something tangible, something real. And I couldn't give myself a straight answer. So I came to the realization that something needed to change. I needed a violent shift of surroundings, perspective. I couldn't just get a hobby. It had gone too far. So I started looking for a way to do that. So I started straight away thinking, a school, education. Let's just learn something. Let's attend a school somewhere. So I started looking at craft schools. Now let's wind back even further. The trees, the woodlands, the forest has always existed in my life as a very natural part. I grew up in a rural area. My grandmother had a big farm. I roamed there. I helped out. I whittled a lot, but I don't have any stories of a slöjdy grandparent showing me things or any real a child's revelations. So I started looking into craft schools, found a lot of them. There's a whole bunch in Sweden, and I found Säterglänta, and I applied and I got in. And we could just say that's that, and now we're here, but I'll humor you a bit more. So Säterglänta is probably the premier craft school in Sweden, I'd say so. And academically, in my mind, this is my talk, so I can say what I want. It's a glorified community college, academically. It doesn't hold any real weight if you want to do anything. Now, slöjd-wise, craft-wise, it's very illustrious. It's, at least to the people who went there, you're sort of part of a gang. Now, technically, it's what's called, and I had to look this up, it's a higher vocational education. That's a mouthful. Which means that if you go there for 3 years, you can technically get the profession. You can do what's called a journeyman's test, and then congratulations, you got a paper. I don't know what you do with that, but you got it. But Säterglänta is, what's the name? I wrote that down. So yes, a couple of years ago, they changed the name from what it was before to the Institute for Slöjd and Craft, and that basically says it all. And the school is located in Insjön, a small little township in the county of Dalarna. It's sat up on a mountain, because of course it is. Why not collect a bunch of crafty loons up on a mountain and see what happens? And it's very much a, how do I put it? It is what you make of it, which you can say about everything, but doubly so for the school, because you can just get in. You don't have to have any affinity for craft or form. It's, again, it's a community college, very low grade as far as educations go. Now, if you make something of it, if you truly understand what's going on, you're on a school surrounded by some of the best craftspeople in Sweden, nigh the world, learning from teachers as. When I went there, my head teachers were Bert Moen, Fritjof Runhall. We had Ramon Persson was there, and we had Jörg Sundqvist, of course, Tom Granat. So it's it's an illustrious cast of craftspeople that you learn from. And at the school, you can study blacksmithing and become a blacksmith in the end. You can study weaving, become a weaver in the end. You can study sewing and become a sewer in the end. And then you can study wood and learn things about wood, because that's what they call it, the wood course. And I mean, the education is very broad. I mean, if you look at, it's a lot like the courses offered at Northhouse. When I started there, we started from the bottom, as it were. We went out, took down a little birch, just started carving things from it, really. Spoons, wall hanger. We went down to carve dough bowls, some simpler joinery, more intricate joinery. We did different kinds of weaving with split pine and birch bark and willow. We made birch bark canisters. We turned. We learned how to do traditional paints. And yeah, so if you have the vocation for it, if you want to make something of it, you really have all the possibilities to do so. Now, to be frank, I was a bit of a rubbish pupil, because I sort of went there, got a real profound craft overload, and just a sensation of, oh, this is it. This is what I've been faffing about, meandering through life, sort of searching for. Something real to pursue in a lot of facets. Now, some of the people that I went there with, I don't quite know what they were doing there. They were just doing, I don't know, faffing about. So, at the end of each school year at Sätergläntan, you get to choose a project to pursue for 2 or 3 months. Just any old subject you can think of, and you get to pursue it with all the resources at your disposal. Excuse me, I need to put a couple of axe handles on the fire. Julia's going to love that. You get to pursue a subject of your choosing. And my first year, well, you also get to do, but they stopped this, but I was the last one, part of the last class to do it. You get to choose a crafts person in Sweden to do a short internship with. And I actually chose to do an internship with Niklas Karlsson, the pragmatic spoon carver extraordinaire in Hälsingland. We'll get back to him later, but at the time he was just starting to develop his kitchen kits, a series of spoons and some spatulas and some spreaders, as a sort of something you could just switch out all your plastic utensils for wood straight away. So I thought, that's a nice idea. I'll just steal that, thank you very much, and based my project on that, and did a series of rubbish spoons and spatulas, but nonetheless, I did it. For my second year though, that's when and let's get some pictures going, because now I actually have pictures. And that's when I decided to pursue pole lathe turning. I started using the old Instagram, looking at craft for inspiration, and I'd found Jarrod Dahl, and I'd found Robin Wood and some other people, and I saw the pole lathe and just thought, oh, this is something different entirely. I was really fascinated with turning at the time. I turned a lot on an electrical lathe, but it felt a bit disjointed. I didn't really feel, I was stood at a machine. This wasn't really what I was into. I was stood at as a machine, but I really liked the process and the result. So what I chose to do is I chose as my second year project to pursue pole lathe turning. Now, I quickly found out that there was no one at the time turning on a pole lathe to any serious degree. Now there's one, but there was no one at the time. But I got a hot tip from Bet that in Insjön, the little town, there was a man named Theo who then 16 years ago had attended a class with Robin Wood at Sätergläntan. The last course, up until Jarrod came the other year and held the course, and I started holding courses last year, there had been none. And he had built a lathe with Robin, and he had turned a bunch of bowls. Then he had just stopped, and he had a series of hooks as well, but it had just been sat in his shed, and he had probably turned once a year at some medieval fair. And he was all ears, and he just lent me his lathe, which was very kind. And yeah, I wouldn't do it, but he was a nice boy. Now the lathe, it's the one that's pictured. Now I didn't turn that bowl up top during my first project. This is actually when I went back the other year and helped a girl I had chosen to do pole lathe turning as well. So I got to come back and turn on the same lathe, but with the same tools, and even with the same pole that was still in the grindhus, the timber framing construction where I had my lathe when I did my project. So the lathe, I digress, I do that a lot, but the lathe was, a rickety thing, half rotten, but what it was a starting point, a jumping off point. And the hooks, they worked. Now, when I went back, I reground all the hooks. So that was a nice feeling, just going back, fixing all of Theo's tools. But the lathe worked. And more important than finding out what works, I found out what I didn't like, what didn't work. So I had a great jumping off point. And I just took to it. The physicality, the coordination needed, it really lended itself to what I'm about, I guess. I've taken a lot of martial art. I studied a lot of martial arts in my life. I've done a bunch of skateboarding, climbing, and I really like having my whole body engaged and feeling a real connection to what I'm doing. And if I felt disjointed behind an electrical lathe, behind a pole lathe, I didn't even feel that I was standing behind it. All of a sudden, I'm connected to the lathe. In a sense, I am the lathe. I don't press a button. I treadle. So I turned a bunch of bowls. I forged some hooks, and then all of a sudden, the project was over, and my time at Sätergläntan was nearing a close. Well, I was actually thinking about attending a third year because I had nothing better going on and I couldn't really see more than a couple of inches in front of my face. So I thought, I like this, let's do it for another year. But I just wanted to turn. So attending a third year just wasn't an option. So what options did I have at that point? I could get a job, I guess. I've never been good at jobs. I've had a lot of them, none for very long. So that's not an option. Okay, so I started thinking about how could I instead start building a life around craft instead of just shoving craft into a life. So I started looking around, and then I just found an advert that said small log cabin on private island. And turns out there was a family who lived in Stockholm but owned an island about an hour outside of Stockholm. And said family were moving to Berlin at the time, and they needed I guess you would call it a caretaker. So I struck a deal, basically working 10 hours a week and doing repairs, building things, upkeep on the island, managing the little forests and the woodlands. And then I could just do what I want. So all of a sudden I had all the time in the world, and I also had on the island a nice supply of alder, and I had a neighbor on the mainland, a nice older couple that owned a lot of land. And just basically I went over there for the first time, met them for the first time. Christer, the man, the patriarch of the whole area, basically showed me a map and said, "This is my land. Please don't take down these big trees. Otherwise, you can take down as much wood as you want. And I'll let you know if I take down anything big, so you can come and have a look in my wood pile." So all of a sudden, I was living on an island with all the time in the world to pursue and apply myself to the thing that I really wanted to apply myself to, which is quite a marvelous feeling, because usually it doesn't work that way, does it? You have this thing that, oh, I'd really like to have the time. And all of a sudden, I had the time and I had the resources, and I didn't really have to worry about money. As you see, that it's a lake full of fish. I could just fish. I could work for the neighbors and trade that for vegetables that I grew. I grew my own vegetables, so I had all the time in the world, and I just got to it. I got to turning. Now, in the beginning, I did faff about quite a bit and just all over the place. And I realized, okay, we have an opportunity here. I was very somber about it. We have to rein it in. So I can't just be sat around experimenting with hooks and shapes. I need to really do this. So what I did is I bought 2 hooks from Jarrod, a small one and a big one. Okay, now I have 2 hooks, good hooks, approved by the big dog, J-Dog. He made these. These are good. So I could use them, and I could faff about with my own hooks, sure, but I knew that I had something that worked. And I made a really stable lathe, and I just got to turning. And I decided, no fucking about with different shapes all over the place. I decided on a simple open shape, a little foot, and I just turned that. No end grain cups, no boxes, just that for about a year. And I turned, I don't know, let's say 100 of them, just honing in, just like I would hone in the basic techniques when I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or the honing in a skateboard trick. Just let's hammer this in. It's 10,000 hours to become really good at something, but it's 10,000 hours with intent, not just So I took to that, and I turned a whole lot. And then, as luck would have it, in 2018, Jarrod came to Sweden. Who would have thought it? So he came over, held a course, a couple of presentations, and I found out about it through him, which is quite funny. Called up one of the consulants and said, "Hey, I exist. I turn on a pole lathe. Do you need any help?" They said, yes, you need a lot of help. We don't know anything about pole lathe turning. Would you like to come down and assist? I said, sure. Can you pay me? They said, no, we can't pay for anything. Can't pay for your trip. Can't pay for you staying somewhere. We can't pay you a wage. We can't even buy you coffee. So this is one of the times where I said, okay, my love for the game exceeds my pride. So I went down, followed Jarrod around, helped him, and oh, here we are. Look at us. Look at us. There we are. So I followed Jarrod around, helped him out on his course, on his presentations. And I mean, sure, this was out of love of the game, but it was a selfish love, I guess. Because up until this point, I had never, look at my adoring gaze. Not really. We're making silly faces, aren't we? Up until this point, I had never talked to anyone about pole lathe turning. And by that, I mean, I had talked about pole lathe turning to a whole lot of people. I had explained pole lathe turning to a whole lot of people because the interest was here in Sweden, but no one, and I don't know if it was my just compulsive mind that just went into it, or me not liking to be where other people are at and seeing that no one's doing this. I'll be alone. Isn't that nice? With no one to compare myself to. So, yeah. Let's see, what's the next picture? Oh, and then here we go. So I did that, went down, had a chat with Jarrod, good old time. Then I went back to the island, and I might have described it as a fantastic experience, and it was, but the island wasn't mine, and the family that lived there, they wanted to be there as well. So it was very much not my own experience. When they wanted to come over the summers or over a school break, I simply had to remove myself. And I just felt, is this what it's going to be? Because I wasn't selling things at the time. I turned 100 bowls, I didn't sell one.
How big was the island, Daniel?
It was about, I think 1,000, no, it was bigger than that. There was 2 islands. When I moved there, I lived on a small island that was about 1,000 square meters. I don't know what that is. And the big island, I mean, it was a big island. It was big enough that I had a 6-wheeler that I drove around with. And yeah, but that was the only I was the only one living on the island. And
yeah.
At the shortest spot along the lake, it was about, I think, 35 meters over. And there were some summer cottages and such, but on the island I was alone. And it was, I don't know how big the island was, but big enough, I guess. Big enough for me and the 2 squirrels that lived there. Feisty things. So I went back to the island, not really knowing what to do, because as I said, I wasn't selling things at the time. I wasn't holding courses, because I turned 100 bowls. I kept a few, but I burned the most, because I really, again, craft is something that needs to be respected in my mind. It was so important to me because it was really the first thing that I'd found and really felt the connection to. So I respected it a whole lot. So I felt I really need to be pleased with my skill and with my work before I start selling anything, which can sound daft, because of course people would buy things. So we sat on the island, and as luck would have it, I was very interested in building preservation as well. Old carpentry, traditional carpentry techniques, log homes. And my other set of neighbors, the daughter of previous name, my wood supplier, his daughter, they were building a log home. Well, they weren't building a log home. A couple of lads from Jämtland up north were building them a log home. And I ended up helping out, actually putting the log home together. and I really enjoyed it. And I really got a good connection with the boss, the log chief. Isak is his name, and we had a good time. And then they went up north, and then I was just sat on the island again. Okay, what now? What now? So I called Isak. I asked him, "Do you have any more? Do you have any more work? I really like working with you guys. Do you have any more projects I could be a part of?" And he said, "Yeah, sure. We have something lined up in October this fall. Let's talk. That'll do. That'll work." And this was in May. So I said, "Oh, that's nice." Hung up the phone and thought, well, what will I do until then? And then the day after, the morning after, I got a text from Isak saying, "How fast can you come up and work?" So one lad had gotten quite sick, and another one had been injured outside of work, so he needed help fast. So I fought for a bit and said, "Give me a couple of days." So I removed myself from, got my things in storage, and then I went out and worked for the summer. So, and this image basically sums up my Jämtland experience. But what I did do is I went up and got thrown into this project. Isak showed me a corner joint and said, "You need to copy this old joint, put a new log in. I have a way of measuring and marking it out, but I have ADHD running out of my ears, so I can't really show you. So look at the old one, look at the new one, and figure it out." And I did. And I ended up, I think we counted that we switched out about 450 meters of old timber. So that was a nice beginner, little soft start to that. And then did some other small jobs during that summer. And then I just decided, well, yeah, let's do this. So we went down, did some more work on my neighbor's house, my soon-to-be ex-neighbors, and then we just packed all my things and I went up. I lived in a trailer in Isak's yard for a bit, and then the plan was for me to work half-time, part-time, and then do my slöjd in the downtime. But that worked for about a month. The second month I worked 200 hours. 6 months in, I was running the logistics of the company together with Isak, because when I find something, you might notice that when I find something, I can't really leave it alone. I have to really go at it. So what ended up happening was that I got the responsibility to do the payroll, and found out that people were skimming money, putting down extra hours, extra miles, stealing things. So we ended up, because people are trash sometimes, so we ended up firing some people. Some people ended up quitting because they weren't pleased with having their pay cut with a third. So this is basically Jämtland. Wherever you look, there's a view of a mountain. So this is a nice picture, and this is the real experience. Me stood around hitting a rock filled with ice with a sledgehammer so I can fit the bottom log. Now, this was my workshop up in Jämtland. My workshop was above Isak's workshop, so we had a quite good connection. Spent a lot of evenings up there. He didn't spend many evenings up there because he had 10 dogs, 3 children, and his hands full. But I digress. Where was I? Oh yes, we fired people and we needed help. So cue, this also sums up Jämtland, but cue this guy, Niklas Karlsson. Remember him? So I was set in Jämtland, had a good workshop, but I was a lonely boy. I was just sat up there. A lot of output, no input. And we also needed help. So I remembered Niklas Karlsson, who also works with building preservation. Now, he actually dissuaded me from getting into building preservation, calling it a hellish job. So I ended up calling him a couple of years later after I'd done my internship, asking him, hey, do you want a hellish job? And he did. So we ended up working together, and we also ended up talking craft, because that was my little idea on the side. Get Niklas in, he can help us out, get the company on its feet, we can talk craft together. And I already knew that Niklas and I had quite, not a too similar idea, but we had enough connecting points where we could talk and work together. So we worked a whole lot together. This is us up in Skellefteå in the real north, doing a little renovation on a tiny little cottage on a open air museum. So we ended up talking a lot, late evenings in little cottages up north. And we really realized that we had very similar ideas when it came to our work, our process, what we valued, respect we had for craft, and also how we wanted to go about showing it. So we sort of took our ideas and combined them, which ended up that in the end, none of us was really that pleased with what we ended up with. But it was a nice little thing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So what happened was that we decided to do a proper slöjd project together. And we applied for a project grant, and got it. And the grant was for us to do what we called a slöjd gallery tour. And the slöjd gallery was basically a pop-up shop gallery where we wanted to shine a light on our slöjd, our craft. And when I say slöjd, it's a bit odd. The Swedish language is a bit odd. When I say slöjd, I both mean my craft, and I also mean the products. So we wanted to show our slöjd, production slöjd. So what I brought into it was that I wanted to do a living exhibition. So here we are. This is us. Look at those guys. So we went about, toured a bit beforehand, did a couple of Christmas markets, and okay, we can do this together. And the project was basically showing the quantity and quality of our goods. So I ended up turning a whole lot of bolts, actually 98 of them. I was supposed to do 100, but I couldn't really get a hold of any good timber up in Jämtland. I would really like to turn 100 bolts, 50 big ones, 50 small ones from the cores of the bigger ones, same design, all blue, but I did a whole, look at that, it's still nice. So we ended up touring. We were supposed to do 3 big stops. We ended up doing 2 big stops and 2 small ones. So I had my lathe, and Niklas was sat carving spoons. And he had 100 spoons, and we carved and we turned as we went along. And we just wanted to, I mean, in Sweden, slöjd has had a real boom as of late, just the latest couple of years. But the sort of slöjd that I do and Niklas does, the nitty-gritty, just the production slöjd, it isn't flashy, it isn't fancy. We don't have a mission. We're not trying to say anything. We're just trying to make healthy, nice products for people to have in their home.
What shops, what cities did you get to?
So these photos are from Östersund, close to where I was living in Jämtland. And then we did Stockholm, and we did a couple of, in Stockholm, we did a couple of smaller stops as well. And we, so this was us in Östersund. And what do you think that says, Jarrod?
I don't know.
It says, please touch the bowls.
Nice.
Because people didn't really understand. So that's a nice little note. And I also had one sitting on my lathe that said, please don't touch the tools. They're very sharp and very precious. So we ended up touring, having little talks, inviting people. We had a couple of guests, Magnus Sundelin, Frej Lonnfors, Julia Kaltoff, Bengt Waldmarsson. In Östersund, we had my coffee guy come around. He talked about craft and coffee. I did a little routine about the connection between good craft and good coffee. And we weren't pleased, but people were pleased. The people that gave us money were pleased enough to give me more money. So I shouldn't complain. And this was in Stockholm. And there I'm sat. And there's Niklas. We weren't talking at the time. But let's see. So
why weren't you pleased?
I wanted to do more of the things that I'm doing now, but the undertaking was, let's just say, people have different strengths, and one of my strengths is I quite like planning, logistics, but Niklas is very much a doing the work sort of guy. So we weren't able to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do. And I wanted to do a lot of work leading up to the exhibitions. I wanted to record little talks with us. I wanted to, when he was visiting me or I was visiting him, I wanted to do little videos, but we ended up not doing that many visits, and it sort of meandered out to, and he just wanted to do exhibitions. He just wanted to do a couple of stops. So mixing those two didn't really end up with either one of us getting totally pleased. Now,
I see.
I'm pleased because no one can take away from me that we did this, and no two professional carvers had done such a thing together without any consultants involved. Now, we did get a project wrong, but still, we did the damn thing. So yeah. Now we get to what I wanted to talk about 20 minutes ago. What I'm doing at the moment. So let's turn the clock back to 2018 when I made this little pot. A square little pot, because I wanted a square little pot. And people were quite excited at this little abomination of a thing. So I made that, and then a while later, a girl I fancied at the time said that she really liked the square pots and I should make a bigger one. And that's basically all you need. So I made this pot, and I think I hollowed this one by drilling a series of holes in a little square and then just banging the core out with a sledgehammer. But what I did do is that I fastened it lying down in my bench and put my chainsaw, my little electric chainsaw that I worked with every day up north, doing finicky little repairs and tenons and mortises and odd little shapes. And I was using it as sort of a router, I guess, getting the thickness of the walls down. And I was stood with it and just thinking to myself, hold on, square hole, chainsaw. Surely it can't be that easy. And funny enough, when you take your, I have in Sweden, you can take what's called a driver's license for your chainsaw driver's license. And when you do that, part of the test is making 4 plunge cuts, 2 vertical, 2 horizontal, getting a square little chunk out. So what I started doing is simply just taking a square out of the middle of the wood. And all of a sudden, to my knowledge, the first shrink pot nests were born. And I'd done some shrink pots at Sätergläntan, round ones, but I always thought that the work was so arduous and so obtuse. It was so drilling a hole and then carving. But all of a sudden, using the chainsaw, I could just cut all that work out and all that, I mean, at mass, and at the same time, be very economical with my material and get from the same piece of wood 2 boxes, or even or even getting 3 boxes, or I mean, as big as the bit of wood is.
Yeah, that's great. I remember seeing that. I too have spent some time building log houses, and you have to learn to plunge cut. It's not something that anybody should try without instruction. But when I first saw that, I'm just like, all right.
So I ended up making a whole lot of pots, and because when we were doing the tour, I didn't have a lathe at the time. First of all, I turned 100 bowls, but we put a part of my lathe in storage with the other exhibition things. So I didn't have the lathe, so I just made a bunch of pots, and I brought them to Telefest at the time, brought 15, sold all of them, brought 20 to Stockholm, sold all of them, and that had never really happened to me. And the sort of, not just the response and selling the things, but realizing that a shrink pot, is such a marvelous product, because when out peddling spoons or bowls or some other things, selling spoons, I very often got the question, it's very lovely, this spoon, it's quite nice. And here I had just an Anna Casserly spoon sitting around, by the way, as a prop. Here you go. Yes, but what can you use it for? Or with a bowl, it's very nice, but what do I put in it? Well, you use it for spooning things, as you do. Figure it out. But with a pot, instead, I got the reaction, oh, what a nice pot. I'll buy it and figure out what to put in it. Just exploring different variations, going overly wild like this with an entirely cleft surface, or just cleft surface and really bold axe marks like this. I think this. So I started making a bunch of pots, and yeah, that sort of led into what I'm doing at the moment. As I said, one of the guests, did I mention him? One of the guests during our pop-up tour was Frej Lundfors, another very talented craftsman person in Sweden who also makes pots. And we just started talking about pots. And I realized something, that we were having a different sort of conversation. When I talk to Niklas about spoons, or even turning to some degree, it's so open-ended. It's so, the possibilities are endless. If you arrange 100 spoon carvers along a line and they're all looking at you, you'll get not 100 unique processes, but they'll be very varied. But if you put up 100 shrink pot makers, I mean, it's very fixed steps to the shrink pot process. You have, especially if you're making a square pot, you have to shape the outside, you have to hollow it out, you have to cut the little creuse for the bottom, you have to put the bottom in, and you have to make a lid. And there's only so many ways you can do that.
Yeah, I'm sitting by, I mean, without the images, I have one. That was the last one that you had shown, maybe that, but we hold our plug-in.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you got one of the wilder ones from the wilder batches in the beginning.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but basically, what me and Frey are doing at the moment is all the things that me and Niklas didn't do. So we're going to work together during the spring, summer, and we're going to do a lot of square pots together and record our conversations and the work and just dive into what happens, the nice little conversations that I found us to have over the pots, and see just what can we discover when working together and talking together on such a similar and constrained little process.
What's Frey's handle on Instagram?
It's just Frey. It's his name, Frey Lundfors.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's F-R-E-J, right?
FREJLONNFORS. Right. And I could just, for the sake of it, I could just.
Oh yeah, I got a bunch of questions here as you're doing that. Question about the chainsaw. I'm always really cautious about the chainsaw. The plunge cuts can be quite dangerous. If you're not trained, you'll get a chain bar in the face. So someone's asking about what kind of chainsaw that is, and it is a very small tipped. I'll answer for you. Very small tipped special blade.
So it's one of Steel's battery powered. They released a more powerful one, but it's one of the battery powered ones, and this is actually the stock bar on it, and it's it's very narrow. Still, and it doesn't throw at all, basically. But there is an even smaller carving bar you can buy.
Right, it's that small tip that kind of prevents that from.
Yeah, exactly.
Back.
Yeah.
What about large shrink pots? I've seen a few around in Sweden. Have you?
I mean, I've seen buckets, I've seen stools, yeah, really big ones, but they're not pots anymore. It's a shrink stool, it's a shrink bucket.
Right.
Yeah.
People are asking about how to make the shrink pot specifically, and that's a little bit more technical for our talk, but
I mean, if let's just put it like this, that's exactly what we're going to show. We're going to show the process in depth and how me and Frey do it. But basically what you do is you take a fresh bit of wood, you hollow it out, you cut a little groove and put a bottom in it that sort of clicks into place, and then the whole pot shrinks onto it. It's a very simple technique, but very ingenious.
Yeah, and sometimes the body cracks. It shrinks maybe too much.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I had a shrink pot crack, actually. And when I see a lot of people making them, and you see what they're using, the body is maple and the bottom is oak. Of course, nothing is giving way.
Right.
So I usually use either, if I'm using a hardwood for the body, I usually use an especially soft wood for the bottom. So this is birch and the bottom is spruce. So it just
compresses.
And you can get a really tight fit that way as well.
Yeah. What kind of paint do you use?
I go back and forth. This one I've actually gone back to. So this is painted with egg oil tempera. But I use milk paint, casein paint most of the time. just for the ease of use. But I do feel that that can just be me getting a bit, thinking it's a bit boring, but it's a bit flat in my mind, especially when I'm working with these. You can't really see it in this lighting, but I just feel like the egg-roll tempera over the oil paint has just a nice matte sheen finish, instead of just being straight matte or just too shiny like the oil paints can be.
Here's one. You like this one? How do you spend a lot of time sharpening your hooks on your pole lathe?
Not as much time as I should probably, but I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. But sure, you do end up spending a lot of time sharpening your hooks. That you do.
Yeah. Is the blue paint significant in Sweden? I know the red. There's a red.
Yeah, the red cottages made from the irony earth pigment, and the blue. I mean, up in Dahl, we have something called Dahl blue. It's not this ultramarine. It's actually, I think it's a Berliner Paris blue with a lot of white. Is the Dahl blue. It's a light blue, so it does have a lot of significance. I mean, like everywhere else, blue paint has been highly valued due to the pigments being used, lapis lazuli. So it was a real. It was a paint for rich people. The words fail me, but
yeah. That's the blue. Is very special for a long time. The lids for the shrink pot. What's the grain direction?
So the grain direction in my lid is, it's lying down. So the grain is along the lid, yeah. And standing grain preferably, but I can't get it. I've never really done end grain lids, but I do. I see a lot of people do it when they make round pots, and I can really see the point there. I've done a couple of, just recently I started out from the beginning, as it were, with doing a couple of small round pots and carving the round lid and the round bottom from a with the grain going along. It's not a nice experience.
Right.
Bandsaws are nice. They're a nice thing.
Yeah, they are.
And also when making, I was sat carving a round box and thinking, I know of a supreme method of turning things round. So why not just put it on the old lathe?
Right. Here's a question from way back. I didn't get a chance to sneak it in, but someone was asking how old you were when you lived on the island, if you want to answer. And then, just commenting on, it was kind of a soul searching time while you were there.
Yeah. I mean, geez, crazy. I have no sense of time. I barely know how old I am now, but I think when I lived on the island, I was 28, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't know.
What day is it? Who are you?
Here's a question. I know I tuned in the one or two times that you did the podcast. If that was your podcast or yours and Emmett's, I wasn't quite clear on that. But there's a question from Charles Chuck Trella.
Bring back Big Slöjd.
Just got too much. What the question is what happened to it, or are you guys going to continue?
What happened to it is that we're going to, Emmett and me, we're still talking, we're having lovely little conversations. But what happened was last year happened, and I was sat in Stockholm. I moved down from Jämtland, planning to start some sort of shop course business. I was working part-time with Julia Kaltov, thought that's a nice little tasty little work to have. And then I moved moved down to Stockholm at the end of February last year, planning to open a business where a lot of people would be gathered at one place. And that didn't really work out. And in the midst of that, me and Emmett had a lot of business plans and ideas and podcasts, and I just had to, let's take a step back. But it's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, we're kind of out of questions. So are you in Stockholm right now, or are you just outside?
I'm about an hour outside of Stockholm.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't imagine that fireplace is a city fireplace, is it? They're probably more countryside.
No, this is an old worker's cottage from the 1600s. So it's a big old open fireplace with a baking oven to the side of it.
Nice. I always love those corner fireplaces.
I mean, they don't provide any heat unless you're sat in it, but so yeah.
Yeah, someone's commenting that you're making axe handles for Julia, and she had mentioned that too. But
I'm aware.
Yeah. Is there a tradition of making square pots?
There is an old tradition of it. Book covers, and especially, I mean, I'm not making square pots with feet and painting them white. I'm not the first one. Knut has made them, and Knut got inspired from old pots. I mean, I can even
try it.
Yeah.
I think Jess is on here to kind of end it, but I think you should finish with that.
Oh, definitely. Show the images if you can. And if you disappear from Zoom, we just want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your story, Daniel. Yeah, let's see the pictures. It's always fun.
Let's see. Do I have any pictures of the old ones?
Mostly book boxes, I would suppose, huh? That's kind of what I've seen.
So there we go. Let's see. Share
screen. Or Bible boxes. Oh yeah, look at that.
Here's one with little feet and square, lots of patterns going on. And
that's at Nordiska.
Yeah, Nordiska. If you want to look at Swedish cast, you just look up Digital Museum, and then you can see photos from all the collections in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway.
Yeah, it's amazing online archive. And sometimes you have to fool around with searching in Swedish.
Yeah, exactly.
To get good results, but you can use Google Translate.
Do some Google Translate finagling. So I just want to show one last pot.
Yeah, it seems like your signal's coming in. There's still 79 people watching. So
this is the latest pot I've made. I've started a new batch, but this is really
nice.
Me feeling that I'm sort of getting all my ducks in a row and getting the form together, especially with the lid, just having it being one unit. And the lid is actually, I actually have it here.
Nice.
So the lid is a
nice. You know I like that.
I know, that's why I brought it. Look at me, Jarrod. Do you approve? So it's all that. So these are the pots that I'm going to be making from now, focusing on for a bit. The lid is a bit tricky to make, but it's so satisfying seeing it being one unit.
It looks really nice with the top over the base.
Instead of having this little a box with a lid, this is just an obelisk, a totem.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Daniel, and a big thanks to Jarrod, who is the creative genius behind Wood Month for sure, with a great Rolodex of incredible craftspeople to invite. So we appreciate everybody who's hung around. In the interest of shameless commerce, I will say that you can buy milk paint from the North House School store. You can give us a call and Cindy Lou will send you some pretty paint in the mail. Yeah, which can be tricky to find. So I think that about does it. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we'll have Daniel on campus next to our large fireplace one of these days soon.
I'd like that very much.
Yes, and we will, North House is going to take a little break from webinaring here in the month of April. We're taking the first 2 weeks of the year of April to host our annual instructor retreat where we do, this year it's virtual, but we bring together our instructor community for hanging out and a lot of professional development and talk about craft and teaching in the school. So we'll be focusing on that. And then in late April, we will return with webinars. We've got some really cool stuff happening in June, some lunch and learns with a Danish paper cut artist, a traditional canvas and rope making fellow from England, and an antiquarian horologist who repairs antique clocks and automata. So those will be coming at you in June, and we'll have a few things happening in May too. Thanks to everybody for joining us.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.